start. Hello and welcome to the 54 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. This is our top 25 rankings podcast, first of the year. Preseason top 25 rankings have been released, and our sponsor this year for the rankings will be Netting Pros, college baseball's top facility, equipment, and netting supplier. Just want to say thank you to those guys. This has been a long-standing partnership. I said this all throughout the Sunday night conversations. Not only does Netting Pros have the best material, the best product, but they really care. If they're going to put their stuff into your facility, it's going to mean something to them. So you get a chance to do business with the best of the best. So if you want to learn more, head over to nettingpros.com. And again, thank you to those guys. I want to say thank you to the three amigos, my three amigos here. We got Aaron J. Fitt, Kendall Bradley Rogers, Sauce Piece, Joseph J. Healy. And gentlemen, I want to start with this. We're going to talk about the preseason rankings, but today, we launched ACC Extra, which we were so fired up about. Obviously, we had SEC Extra last year, and the ACC is such a tremendous baseball conference, always has been, and that conference is ascending big time. Bradley Smart will take the lead there, and so really excited to announce that. So here's my question, and feel free to comment on ACC Extra as you answer the question. It got me thinking. ACC Extra entered my life today. So here's the question. What's the best invention of your lifetime? There are two obvious answers, but, I've lived many decades without ACC Extra in my life, and I will not have that affliction any longer. Joseph, you're a quick thinker. What's the best invention of your life besides ACC Extra?
I mean, the internet, right? Because we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for the internet. So that's probably, thank you, Al Gore. For inventing the internet, because we're all here doing this. Otherwise, I don't know what we'd be doing. We'd be, recording on tapes, physical tapes and putting them out somewhere. But yeah, I'll go with the internet.
Joe, Bradley Smart. So when you did SEC Extra last year, you have been known to rock a, magnificent mustache. And the great Bradley Smart, listeners that don't know, they will learn that Bradley Smart also with an 80 mustache. Wow. Was that premeditated? Was that part of the negotiation? If we're going to do this, you got to get your facial hair game up? Or
I believe it's on the application.
It was.
Must have a mustache.
I like it.
Yeah,
Kendall, go ahead, Joe.
I'd love to say that it was part of the deal. I just think it's one of those situations where, as we've been saying all along, Joe is extremely cool and does a lot of the things that the youth of America are also into. And so growing a mustache just happens to be one of those things.
Yeah. No mustache means you're mid. And Bradley's certainly not going to be accused of being mid.
That's right.
So, Kendall, what say you? What's the greatest invention of your lifetime besides ACC Extra?
The greatest invention.
Joe didn't get one of the two right answers, by the way.
I'll tell you what. I'll say this. I will say this. I will go with like a that's what happens when you're
ringer off. Is that
you're in a different office? I will go with the flat screen television. I don't know about you guys, but I remember back when my wife was in college and we were moving like this 50-inch or 48 whatever inch box Sony television. Remember those things? I mean, they were literally weighed like 900 pounds. The flat screen television, the ability to kind of put those up, and you don't need four people to do it. I'll go with that one. The internet was the very low hanging fruit here.
Listen, and I got to throw a flag on Joe, because technically the internet was officially created on January 1st, 1983, according to our friends at Google. And so it's the greatest invention of my lifetime and Rooney's lifetime, but not of Kendall's and Joe's. I just want to make that clear.
Interesting.
What day was it invented?
January 1st, 1983.
Oh, yeah. You're correct. Thank you for knowing my birthday, by the way. That's very sweet of you.
I'm a good guy. Known you a long time. I'm not going to take the internet, though. I got a better answer, more specific answer. Google Maps. How did anyone function in the world without Google Maps? I remember my first ever work trip for Baseball America to the West Coast, driving around LA, trying to get to these games with these sheets and sheets of MapQuest printouts. And it's there's ridiculous traffic. You think you're going to die, and you're looking down at the freaking maps. You miss one turn and you're screwed. I wind up being 4 hours late for a game at Riverside on a Friday night, Wes Romer and James Simmons, because I missed a turn, and then there's, of course, the traffic was a nightmare coming from LA going west on Friday afternoon, and it was just a disaster. There's no alternate routes they can send you along to avoid the traffic. I mean, and then you got to pull off the road and ask somebody for directions. Like, what are we doing here? Get with it.
That's a
Google
great
Maps.
call. I will tell you that Google Maps, Joe can attest to this, but Google Maps has saved me many of times. I've gone to like a UH or Rice game, particularly UH. It will send me through areas of Houston that you probably don't want to be in, but you know what? I don't want to be late, so I will go through those areas. But Google Maps gets very creative in Houston.
I like it. By the way, Fitzy, your Wes Romer versus James Simmons reference, that is hardcore and elite right there.
Big game. Back when Andrew Checkers was pitching coach at Riverside, had those guys rolling on the mound, and they were pretty good.
Wes Romer would rather hit you
in that
than
rotation
walk you.
Too?
Yeah, Zapchinski also was there, and they had,
Man,
yeah, they had
what
another
a rotation.
Yeah, they had another dude too, but yeah.
Joe, I don't know how you feel about conspiracy theories, but I'm convinced that Wes Romer was one of those guys that would walk 10 people per year and throw 140 innings. I'm convinced that if it was 3-0, he would hit you on purpose because he didn't want to wear the walk. So it's just like, he didn't get the 3 balls very often. So I don't know. Does that qualify as a conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I mean, you got to put I don't blame him. You got to put your foot down. You got to stand for something, and if you're just not going to walk people, real quick though, clarification, Runes, if I may. Aaron, when you said you're 4 hours late for the game, was that 4 hours later than you wanted to get there, or 4 hours after first pitch? Because if it's the latter, I'm not sure why you bothered.
No, I think I meant it took me. I meant to say
from the top of the ninth.
It took me 4 hours to get from LA to Riverside. What I meant to say.
I see.
But,
Okay.
So I think I arrived in like the 3rd inning.
Okay, yeah, I think the worst drive I've ever done in California was I went and watched Pepperdine at UCSB at like 3:00 on a Friday and was at UCLA that night. Would not recommend driving from Malibu to UCLA at 4:00 or 6:00.
And the worst part about that drive, obviously, like coming down PCH is tough, but then you get like the last mile when you're like, you can see the lights of Jackie Robinson Stadium. Yes. You can't get around the block. Like it takes you an hour to get around the block. It's brutal. It's just brutal.
Yeah.
Tough sledding. Gentlemen, you all gave great answers. You didn't give the correct answers. The correct answers, at the risk of being self-serving, are Squeeze Play and ESPN Plus. However, you did give excellent answers. Hey, by the way, on a serious note, and then we will progress. If you are in Southern California and you're listening to us, we are thinking of you. The videos that we've all been watching across the country of the fires you all are enduring are just heartbreaking and soul crushing. So we are thinking of you, and obviously Southern California is, is just such an important part of the fabric of college baseball. And so, again, sending well wishes to you all. Gentlemen, let's jump in. The preseason rankings are such a fun time. And we're not going to talk about the teams we didn't rank. We're doing that on purpose. There will be other times to talk about that. There'll be a piece coming out for the teams that just missed. But for today, we're going to really focus on honoring the teams that made our preseason rankings. And, if you want to do a fun exercise, look at our preseason rankings from last year and what a wild ride preseason rankings can be. Like, they can be incredibly intuitive and accurate in one breath, and then also just like there's wild misses too. Like that, it's that way every year. That's because we can't predict the future. We just try to do that. So we ranked.
Just a quick piggyback on that. So that's why like a lot of the critics, why even do the preseason rankings? It's stupid. Well, we're just telling me what we think is going to happen, and we adjust on the fly. As teams prove on the field that they don't deserve to be ranked in the top 5, then they plummet and then they fall out. Like that's how it works.
Yeah, it's the why do you even do it? That would be like a business saying, why even have a sales team? It's because if your company generates no interest, it doesn't stay in business. And so if we want our sport to grow, we have to promote it. And the preseason rankings are an awesome way to promote our sport. So we shall do that ad infinitum, if I use that phrase correctly. By the way, gentlemen, the Kendall J. Rogers rule is in effect from here to 4. When we bring up teams, there is a 3-name maximum. We're not going to read the roster to the audience. 3-name maximum. Even though Kendall has got a photographic memory and can in fact read the roster to everybody, we're going to try to focus on the 3 most important names. And of course, Kendall will play 5D chess, and he will circumvent the rules as per D1 Baseball.
Well, if it's my rule, I can change it, right?
Sort of. Yes, and you shall. I like that. Kendall, I'm going to come right to you. A&M was we talked about them for 0.3 seconds, and they're the number one team coming in. Tell us why.
Yeah, I just think the big thing with A&M is when you look at the returning pieces offensively, you look at what they added out of the portal. It's one. I mean, their lineup without the portal pieces was going to be really good. Their lineup with guys like Gavin Cash and Matt Bergervin and whatnot. I mean, that's just Wyatt Hensler from Penn, who set all sorts of Ivy League records. They added a lot of power to go with a lot of power. And so, the good thing is they're going to be explosive. They're going to score a lot of runs. I'm expecting them to probably break a lot of record books for A&M, A&M offensively. The devil's advocate here would say, look at, A&M's offense that's coming back from last year and go look at their strikeout totals. Mm-hmm. If you go look at their strikeout totals from last year, is pretty high. So the one thing I would look at if I'm poking holes in A&M would be, do they have the same swing and miss last year? Do they improve kind of their plate discipline? If they don't, that could be a question mark for them. But I still feel pretty good about their pitching staff. Obviously get a Ryan Prager back, who turned down $1.3 million out of the draft, is huge on the front end of the rotation. And then the rest of the pitching staff, Caden Wilson obviously showed some flashes of greatness in Omaha last year against Tennessee. And then when you look at the back end of the bullpen with slider specialist Josh Stewart, A&M just checks all the boxes, and it's not. Well, he's already calling me out. A&M checks all the boxes, and for that reason, they were number one.
Guy couldn't make it through one team without just trampling all over the rules.
It is. They are the number one team, so we'll give them a pass.
They're the number one team, so we can break that rule. But I'll stick to the rule moving forward. You kind of get on a tangent here. It's like
it was good.
It's like the ADD guy. It's hard to stop talking about players.
You were economical with your words, Kendall. I thought that was good. Fitzy, take us to Virginia, because I think that is, we're so used to seeing the SEC team stuffed in the first 5 slots that Virginia sitting there at number 2 kind of jumps off the page at you. And then then I think 3 through 5 was a big discussion for us that went on and on. But go ahead, talk why Virginia's so high, Fitzy.
They're loaded. I mean, it's a team that's coming off, obviously, a College World Series appearance, the second straight College World Series appearance. And sure, you lost a couple of key pieces there, Griffo Farrell. Do previous names count against our 3?
Like they're no longer on the team.
Since you're going to do this to me, absolutely they do count.
No, Kendall, I mean, Rune's rules. He rules.
Yeah, you get a pass. You can give me one name from a past team. I don't want the roster.
Farrell is the key guy. Obviously, it's a big time shortstop that they've lost. In my opinion, the best shortstop in the country. But they've got a guy who slides right into that spot, who's an emerging star. I'll use a name here. That name is Eric Becker. I mean, he had a really good freshman year, played third base. He's a rising star. So I don't think they'll miss a whole lot there. But that's kind of the main, I guess, thing they have to address. But otherwise, I mean, their offense is loaded. I mean, it's one of those offenses too where it's balanced, it's athletic, there's serious power. You got 2 guys back who turned down money in the draft. Harrison did accept the school record for home runs and as an eligible sophomore, and he's back, along with their catcher, who's an All-American. And so, just 1 through 9, they're absolutely jammed. And I think it's a lineup that will be tough to pitch to. It's not just a sellout for power lineup. I like their lineup maybe even better than A&M's for that reason. Maybe they don't have A&M's pure firepower, but it's not far off. It's really right there. And then the difference is I think it's a better Virginia team on the mound than we've seen the last few years. Even Brian O'Connor said that. There's no question about it. They have more depth. They have back end guys. They have a really good 1-2 punch atop the rotation. With obviously Evan Blanco back is my third name as your left-handed ace, a guy that really grew into that role down the stretch the second half last year and in the postseason. And so I just think that in the past maybe we were like, oh, we love the lineup. Last few years we've absolutely loved the position player group. We just had questions about the pitching, and this year there's no question about the pitching. I think it's going to be a really, really strong pitching staff to go along with maybe the best lineup in the country, and once again, really strong defense. So I just don't think there's really any holes you can poke at them.
It's so interesting because Virginia's not the sexy team in the ACC. I feel like that's like Clemson, Florida State, Wake Forest, maybe North Carolina. But they're just, yeah, there you go. Like they're just so blue collar, meat and potatoes. Like Virginia is a program that's been to Omaha 3 of the last 4 years, and their coaching staff has a national title. They know how to do it. It's just, maybe we're spoiled by their consistency, but I love them at number 2. You're right, Fitzy. Like they're, just an incredible offense, different than A&M's, but Very intimidating. All right, let's go 3 through 5. We went LSU 3, Tennessee 4, Arkansas 5. I feel like as a group, we spent a lot of time on this discussion. Joe, tell us why we went LSU, then Tennessee, then Arkansas. Is that answerable?
Well, we put all the names in a hat, and then we just kind of shook it around. I mean, that's really kind of what it is, to be honest. There's a reason they're bunched up right here. I feel like they're, at least from an SEC pecking order perspective, there was a decent bit of distance here versus the rest of the SEC. And at least with LSU, it is a bet on giving them the benefit of the doubt, and they're going to figure things out. I think there was momentum last year. They started off 3-12 in the SEC, got in, got hot, got to the finals of the SEC tournament, got in, got hot, one win away from being in a super where they would have had a favorable matchup with West Virginia. Then LSU could have easily been right back in Omaha again. I think there's momentum there, but where I say we're giving benefit of the doubt is this is a team that is going to need some transfers and some freshmen to be guys right away. There's been a lot of generational talent come through this program over the last couple of years. The guys who are coming in have potential to be those types of generational talents, but they have to prove it first. So they're leaning on, in the lineup, it's Jared Jones. And then what else do you get, right? On the pitching staff, I think we have a decent amount of faith in Cade Anderson as a guy there. But then what else do you get, right? So those, to me, are kind of the bigger questions there. And then it's how do some of the transfers that are moving up, like Luis Hernandez from Indiana State, how well does that, he hit with a lot of power there. How does that, translate moving up into the SEC and facing SEC pitching every single day?
Love it. Kendall, where do you come down on these three? Like, did you see them as very tightly bunched as well?
Yeah. Sorry, I was on mute. I kind of, for me, I feel like they're pretty tightly bunched. I think I have a little bit more faith in LSU and Tennessee than I do Arkansas. It's kind of crazy to say when you look at Arkansas's pitching staff, but this is an offense with Brett Irondale and company that they're going to have to make massive improvements. I mean, if you look back at Arkansas last year, I was just looking it up. I mean, they finished well in the 100s in doubles. They finished 189th in the country in batting average, and they finished between the 60s and 70 range in terms of home runs. So obviously they've got a lot of turnover from an offensive standpoint. They've added some nice pieces. They've got Wahiva Aloy, Kendall Diggs, and guys like that. So they've got potential. They're going to pitch. The question is, will they be as offensive as Tennessee and LSU? I don't know if they will be this year.
Fitzy, what say to you? Do you have a response there or a thought?
Yeah, I do. I mean, first off, I was, I think, the high man in Arkansas. I had them, I believe, 3 on my board. And here's the thing is, Kendall's right. Like, Arkansas offense was not great last year. And guess what? They still won the SEC West and, earned a national seed, top 8. I mean, if they improve at all offensively, which I think they will, I actually kind of like their position player group. I think you're going to see some progression from, some second-year guys like Ryder Halfrick and some of the pieces that they have back, second-year guys in the program. And I like the pieces that they brought in. I think they'll be fine on offense, but I just think the pitching is elite. And for me, that is a separator. Like, I like their pitching the best of this bunch. I think I like their pitching better than anyone's pitching. And it starts, of course, with Gabe Gackle, but you bring in an elite transfer and Zach Root, the lefty from East Carolina. And I mean, the firepower, the bullpen is insane. And it's just, so much depth and real stuff. And for me, I still think you need that to win in Omaha. I mean, we talked so much about Tennessee's offense last year, but I think they led the nation in ERA. Did they not? I mean, I don't think you can. Everybody hits
A&M.
Oh, A&M. Yeah, that's right. A&M. Tennessee was up there. I mean, it was really elite.
Yeah, for sure.
Despite the fact that it was an unconventional approach, it was some opener stuff or whatever. Like, it was an elite pitching staff, and I just think. Everybody hits in this era, but when you get to the postseason, and especially when you get to Omaha in that ballpark, it's the elite pitching that is still the separator. I and I know, like, Mark made the argument, hey, you got to hit home runs to win in the SEC. Okay, sure. I mean, I agree with that, but I still think, like, ultimately, pretty much everybody hits home runs now. I mean, the ball's flying, and so, like, the teams that have the elite arms, I think for me are just a step above, and so that's why. For me, Arkansas was the top of these 3. But then again, I mean, LSU and Tennessee have power arms too. They just have more to prove.
Yeah, I mean, LSU, I mean, if you look at LSU's week of rotation, I mean, Chase Shores, 2 falls ago when I saw him in Lafayette before he got hurt, I mean, it was 97, 99 with like a power slider. Anthony Ianson was, the top pitching transfer in the offseason. You have Kate Anderson on Friday. Then on the back end, you got Connor Ware and Gavin Guidry. So, I mean, those are – if Ianson, makes a quick transition and Chase Shores is healthy the whole season, I mean, LSU has elite potential on the mound too, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I would say my last thing here is that I agree with what Aaron's saying. I do agree that their pitching is a little bit of a separator. I just think back to stuff like, Arkansas did have maybe not head and shoulders the best pitching, but on paper, we really, really liked it. Not as much as this. I get that. But ultimately, they were undone in the postseason by what? Like one really big swing of the bat against K-State. And so I agree that on paper, that can be a separator in a world where everyone hits home runs. But it just feels like you're working on such thin margins when that's your path to winning. Because I look at the SEC stats, and Mark and I have talked about this as the reason why this is top of mind. 3 of the 4 teams in Omaha last year from the SEC had 100 or more home runs. Kentucky was the outlier, and they were an outlier for a lot of reasons. But Kentucky had more home runs than Arkansas. So it is just a fascinating debate because I don't know that we really have the right data to really disprove one way or the other. But man, it's just such a stressful way to live when you're getting by on the pitching and you're susceptible to one big swing of the bat just totally upending your entire season.
Yeah, I think Arkansas is the most polarizing team. I'm not afraid to say they're going to be my national championship pick. I'm drunk on the Hogs, all in on Arkansas, and mostly because of what you're saying there, Joe. Like, I think their position player group it's significantly improved. Like, they're older, they're more physical, they're more balanced. I just think last year's position player group, there was too much duct tape, as far as putting that thing together. I would say their pitching, I'm not even sure I would say it's significantly better. I think that's a defensible comment, but I really feel like their position player group's going to make a jump. I'll tell you guys, and then we'll move on to 6 and 7. Tennessee in this group's the team I'm most concerned about. I'll tell you why I'm wrong. I'm wrong because this coaching staff is they complement each other so perfectly, from Frank Anderson to Tony V to Josh Elander to Quentin Eberhardt, their strength and conditioning guy, who's really like part of their secret sauce. And I love Tennessee's freshman class. Like, in no way am I saying their program's going to downtrend. I'm worried about, you have a Friday night, you have a transfer on Friday nights. You have a transfer at third base. You have a transfer at second base. You have a transfer at first base. And none of these transfers, no offense, are Tommy White or Paul Skeens or Braden Montgomery. It's a different tier of transfer. And I know everybody wanted those players, but I think we're underestimating the fact that Christian Moore and Blake Burke were 2 of the top 6 to 8 players in the country last year, and they were on the same team. And I don't think these transfers, even as a quantity, can make up for that. So anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. I can see why I'm wrong about Tennessee, but I have my concerns given the standard that they've put up there. So let's do 6 and 7. Number 6 was Oregon State. UNC was 7, or I have it reverse, right?
Reverse. And North Carolina 6, Oregon State 7.
So tell us, Fitzy, why North Carolina so high up there?
Yeah, it's a team I think we're all really bullish on. I think Kendall's just as bullish as I am on North Carolina. But I mean, again, it's balance. When I was writing them up and trying to grade them out, there was no category where they ranked worse than above average. And most of them they were plus. I mean, they're just really yes. It's like the McGarry factor. You got to replace Vance Honeycutt, a generational player, probably the best player in program history. But they did as well as they possibly could have to replace him in the portal with Kane Kepley. I mean, it's not going to be Honeycutt. Certainly he's not going to hit for Honeycutt's power, but I mean, he's an on-base machine. He walks like more than twice as much as he strikes out. He flies. He plays also elite defense, maybe not quite, 80 defense like Honeycutt, but it's way up there. He can really defend. He's sneaky strong. I mean, it's a great get out of the portal. They I think they crushed their transfers to plug their holes. The guys on the corner, the small school guys they brought in are really impressive on the corner outfield spots. So, and then you've got a lot of veterans back around the infield, good, proven veteran players, all 4 infield spots. You got maybe the best catcher in the country in Luke Stevenson, who's I think going to have a huge year as a sophomore. And then, on the mound, I mean, it's experience. It's tons of talent. It's tons of depth. You got a rock star closer, and you got a real ace at the top who might be the number 1 pick next year. And I think a big key is Folger Boaz coming back healthy. He did not have full Tommy John surgery last year. It was the brace surgery. I think with him and their Friday night starter coming back is a great 1-2 punch. A couple of sophomores that have first round ability. Really bullish on that. So I just think there's not really a glaring hole on this team. I think they're really strong across the board, and they're coming off Omaha experience too. That matters.
Yep. Let me do the Beavs real quick, you guys. Like I think my overarching theme on the Beavs, it's amazing that Oregon State last year lost their conference affiliation, had their guts ripped out again. They missed a chance to return to Omaha. So it's their second super regional in 4 years. They've hosted twice. I mean, they've been to their last 4 years, they've been to 2 regional finals and 2 super regionals. So it's like that chance to knock the door down, another gut punch with the first pick in the draft in Travis Bazzana, and yet still Ava Arquette, who's one of the top transfers, they get him. Dax Whitney, a 6'5" right-hander from Idaho, who could have easily signed in the draft, they get him. So it's just when I think Oregon State's losing gas and it's like, okay, that's the end of an era, they just keep on keeping on. Their offense is going to be very, very good. They've got a lot of guys back. Obviously, no Bazzana. They've got to. I would say this: Oregon State's got very high-end talent. They've got to figure out the roles. Like Trent Carraway last year was a big get. He only played 17 games. He was very good in those games. But I think Oregon State's got real star power, like high-end, go deep in this thing, star power. The roles have to all come together, particularly on the pitching staff. But and of course, they're going to play a hellacious schedule, 20 home games. It's going to be an RPI bonanza. So Oregon State, like Arkansas, will be very fascinating. All right, the next tier is 8, 9, and 10. It is Georgia, Florida State, Florida. I'm calling this group the Can You Trust Me group. So, Joe, within Georgia, because they're kind of nouveau riche, right? Florida State missed the tournament just 2 years ago. They lost a lot of really, they lost Cam Smith and James Tibbs. And then Florida, we don't have to get into that soap opera, but hey, the two guys that basically drug them to Omaha, I know that's a little pejorative, but Cags and Brandon Neely are no longer on the roster. So Florida is really hard to parse out. What say you on those 3 teams, Joe?
I think what we maybe miss a little bit with Georgia is we focus on, with last year's team success, obviously we focused on Condon. That's a one-of-one thing. But we also focused on, hey, they really went whole hog in the portal and they hit on a lot of them and had a lot of success. Yes, they brought in some talented guys. They've done so again this year. But I think one of the secret sauces that we missed about them or didn't talk enough about last year with that team was just how old they were. When you're dealing with a guy like Corey Collins, for example, who's not there either. But you look at this year's roster again and just looking at their projected, top guys, and it's another really old group. And oh, by the way, in places where you're not returning someone who was on last year's team, you're bringing in transfers from really good programs. Kentucky with Nolan McCarthy. They were in Omaha last year. Devin Obey from Duke, really good program. A transfer from Florida Atlantic. That's a really well-respected coaching staff, on and on and on. You've got players who are old, experienced, successful, played for well-respected coaching staffs. So yes, it is kind of interesting what Georgia's doing with really going harder in the portal than anybody in college baseball right now. But I think behind the scenes, what a lot of it is just let's stay old and let's use that as kind of our the advantage we're going to bring into the season, because maybe there is a little bit of a learning curve with all of us becoming a team, but it certainly didn't stop them last year, and I think it's going to be a similar deal this year.
Kendall, can I steer you to Florida for a second? I find them to be really hard to parse through because we all have so much respect for that program. But yeah. I know I was taking a dig at them, but I kind of meant what I said. Like basically Jack Caglione and Brandon Neely in the postseason last year said, hey, you other 25 dudes, pack your bags for Omaha and just stay out of our way. Yeah. Because those two dudes just said, we got this. Now, again, I'm being unfair to Ashton Wilson and, some others, but Cags and Neely were just not going to be denied.
Yeah, I think the big thing with Florida for me is, I hate to put the onus on one single guy in the whole team, but I would look at Liam Peterson as like the key for them because, I think anybody who saw him last year, in Omaha pitch, he would throw 2 pitches. You're like, oh man, like look at this stuff. And then all of a sudden, like the train comes off the tracks. And so I think for him, we all know he has premium stuff. Can he go out there consistently on a Friday night in the Southeastern Conference and be that frontline ace that they need him to be? If he is that, then I think the dynamic for Florida changes dramatically. I think things kind of fall into place pitching wise. Obviously, they have McNeely back in the fold. I think offensively for me, we're going to talk so much about, Luke Heyman and Kate Curlin and guys like that, Colby Shelton. But the guy for me that I felt like at the end of last year that that started to see the ball a little bit better, the power production was a little bit more consistent, was Brody Dene. I thought he had some really good at-bats near the end of last year, and he could be one of those guys that just, he was already a power hitter for them, but I think he's one of those guys that could come out this spring and be much, much more consistent in terms of his overall, command of the zone. Obviously, a major increase in his average. I think he hit around 240, 250 last year. So I think he has a chance to be much more consistent. But somebody offensively is going to have to step up, because the fact of the matter is Florida last year barely made the NCAA tournament with Jack Caglione is, their key cog in their offensive lineup. He's no longer there. So someone's going to have to step up. Done's kind of that guy for me offensively.
Yep. Kendall, that was an excellent description, like really well said. However, I'm going to pull you over right now for violating the rule. This is a 35-mile-an-hour zone. You were just going 72 miles an hour with at least 7 names from the Gators.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to stop you mid because it was an excellent synopsis, but it's a warning. You're not getting a ticket. You're just
sorry. I'm an overachiever, Rooney, so my apologies.
So this is second warning, though. It's like that time Nathaniel Ratliff was driving to a concert across North Carolina. He's going to Raleigh from the mountains. He got pulled over going like 90 and a 65. Got a ticket. A mile later, he got pulled over again and thrown in the slammer. That's what we'll be doing to Kendall now. He's already broken this thing twice.
Rooney's going to start kicking me out for 5 minutes.
No way.
It's like one of those things where, like, you try to get in your lock code on your phone over and over and over, and it locks you out. That's what's going to happen to me here.
Five minute major is what they would call it.
I will get my thoughts together, clear my mind a little bit.
My concern
go ahead, Joe.
In one sentence with Florida's lineup, because Kendall brought it up earlier with A&M, is you can look at it and say, Gavin Krahovic and Jace Laviolette strike out a whole lot. I worry about that less with them because there's just so much depth there. With Florida, I do wonder if you've got a lineup that you're leaning heavily on Colby Shelton and Cade Kurland and Brody Done and Luke Heyman, and those are guys with swing and miss. And there is a scenario where the lineup does stagnate a little bit because of that. I don't worry as much about A&M with that, but with Florida, I do think it is something to monitor.
Hey, Fitzy, go ahead. I got you're coming to you next, though. Go ahead.
Before you move along, I just wanted to, this group of teams, the one thing I want to say is this. The team I want to plant my flag in here in this group is Georgia. I think Georgia's appropriately ranked at number 8, but I have a feeling that they're going to outperform that ranking because I just love their roster. I think they're power arms and power bats, but they've got so many power arms, and it's, they've a little more, I think, proven power armors than the ones at LSU and Tennessee. I mean, between Colton Smith and Leighton Finley, and then I love their portal class on the mound, but especially love Brian Curley from VCU, just a little badass, 5'10" tank who throws 98 with a wipeout slider from hell. Love what they did on the mound. And again, I'm buying these teams that have elite pitching. I think they're going to have elite pitching. I really do. And we know they're going to hit a ton of home runs. So that's the team that if they wind up winning the SEC East, I will not be surprised.
Although that would be a self-crowning, Fitzy, because there's no
SEC East, of course.
Right. Now, but feel free, fan bases, to self-crown. 11 through 15. I'm sorry, Kendall. 11 through 15, Fitzy, we're coming to you because I'm calling it ACC row. You could even include Florida State here, but Duke at 11, NC State at 13, Wake at 14, Clemson at 15. I'll come back around and talk about Oregon at 12. But go ahead, Fitzy. This was a tough group. We really had a struggle to separate these guys. Yeah,
we sure did. And this is my neck of the woods here, and I still couldn't decide which of these teams I liked the best. And eventually I think, Duke, we settled on just a good balanced team with, again, some nice veteran pieces in the infield that I love. Real star power, the sophomores in particular, AJ Gracia and Kyle Johnson, the two-way star, are dudes. There's got so much left-handed pitching and left-handed hitting, but the left-handed pitching especially really leaps off the page. So, it's a really good program that's been knocking on the door to Omaha. This could be the year they break through. We had NC State next. For me, and I have, I love their bullpen. That's the thing I love most about NC State. I have more question marks about some of the rest of their roster. I think there's more questions to answer than maybe in years past on the position player side and in the rotation. You've got Delm Fritton is probably the key to the whole thing. They need him to bounce back in a big way because he wasn't very good last year, but he was quite good as a freshman. So that's a major key for them. For me, I mean, I think I had Wake Forest and Clemson ahead of NC State. I was maybe the outlier on that. But Wake Forest is the team that I'm going to plant my flag on. I mean, Clemson is another one that I have a feeling, I just have a hunch they're going to overperform this ranking. But Wake is the one that I think it's almost the post-hype sleeper. Everyone talked about them last year, preseason number 1, 3 top 10 picks, et cetera, et cetera. All those guys are gone now. But I think they're better this year. Tom Walter thinks they're better this year. I mean, I know the coaches always like their teams better, but I mean, they're so much deeper this year. There's so much more margin for error. And yeah, they need some newcomers to click on the mound in the rotation. That's the reason for a little bit of a question mark there. But I mean, I'm buying on Matthew Dallas, the transfer from Tennessee, the lefty. It gives you Josh Hartle look, but with more velocity, and I think it's really good stuff. I'm certainly buying on Duncan Marston, the freshman, who I think is going to step right into the rotation. He couldn't have been more impressive in my fall look against West Virginia. I mean, it was just 94-96 with elite secondary stuff and command, and he's a horse. So I expect he's going to be a super duper star. And you got the best shortstop in the country. I think their lineup is going to be very complete. Again, they've got length, they've got power, they've got athleticism, tons of speed even. There's just, you have a year last year where you underperform and then you lose 3 top 10 picks. So that's why there's, maybe a little bit of hesitation, but I think 14 feels like a decent spot, but I think they're going to be better than that.
Hey, Fitz, Kendall and Joe, before I have you comment on this range of teams, let me give you guys the Oregon synopsis. Oregon has 8 starters returning from a team that was beating A&M 8-0 in Game 2 of our Super Regional. 8 of the 9 starters from that game are back. This is a program that has been to back-to-back Super Regionals. They have an ace in Grayson Grinzel, a lefty, who is the only pitcher in the country who has started 2 Super Regional games from a career standpoint. I might be wrong about that, but I'm almost certain I'm not. And so if I am wrong, please come at me and fix that on Twitter, because it'd be cool to get some other people in that club. And I just think, again, Mark Warzakowski and his staff are so good at recruiting. This roster has got tons of talent. So I think Oregon shows up in the Big Ten as the best team in the league. Hard stop, if you will. I think doesn't mean they're going to win the league, but I think they are going to be the best roster in the league for sure. So Kendall, go ahead. What's some takeaways from that grouping?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to touch on Oregon. I saw those guys in the last year in the College Station Super Regional, and I loved that team. Antoneras was really good that weekend. Maddox Maloney is extremely talented. Jacob Walsh is back. He's got a big-time bat. Grayson Grinzel at the front of the rotation. I just broke my own rule. I'm going to stop at his name. But, he's a really good Friday night guy for them. He'll mix it up from the left side. The biggest thing I like about Waz's club is their runes. They almost kind of remind me of like an old school Fullerton team in a way. Like, they're really hard-nosed. They'll get aggressive on the base paths. They play, they play like lights out. Like, they're going to attack you. They're going to make you make plays. They're going to come right at you on the mound. I think they're going to be really good. And I think if you saw that team at the end of last year and the way they lost to A&M, I remember sitting in the postgame presser, that looked like a team that wasn't devastated. That looked like a team that was ready to start this season that night. And so I think Oregon's going to come out ultra motivated, and I think they're a really good team.
Love it. Joe, any thoughts from that grouping?
One is that I'm with Aaron that we're probably underrating Clemson, because I know progress is not linear. However, I do perceive that to still be a program that's really on the rise here. And if they're going to take another step, that means they're going to be right on the doorstep of Omaha again, right? Mm-hmm. Again, you can't guarantee anything, but that's just my feeling in my gut. And then the other is that, having NC State here is just yet another kind of benefited out deal. Not that they don't have a good roster, but that program's just so consistent. I mean, okay, they missed a regional a couple of years ago, but for the most part, for the last 15 years, you can just go ahead and pencil in NC State to be somewhere between 15 and 23 in the rankings pretty much every week. And maybe they host, maybe they're a 2 seed. what have you, but they're just going to be there. They're so consistent. And that's really impressive when you consider, that they really, especially in the immediate aftermath of losing a guy like Tommy White to the portal, losing Cannon Peebles to the portal. It's kind of amazing to think about how good those teams could have been had those rosters held together. So super impressive that in the face of that, NC State pushed back, and now they're back to kind of where they would have been otherwise in Omaha last year.
Yep. I think Wake and Clemson are great, air quotes, buy lows right now, because they feel like top 5 programs when they're right. And like Clemson, particularly to your point, Joe, like Eric Bakich, Cam Canarella, Aiden Canuck, like I feel like those 3 dudes are just not going to they're not going to allow them not to get to Omaha this year. Now, if we got to play it out, but very interesting. All right. The next group, I think this is the group of intrigue. Vandy at 16, Oklahoma State at 17, Mississippi State at 18, Texas at 19, DBU at 20. This is just a fascinating group here. I feel like there's a wide range of outcomes for all 5 of these teams. Joe, why don't I come back to you, because there is a lot of SEC flavor in here. What jumps out from this grouping? You're muted. Oh, I thought Joe was being pensive.
Well, I was for a little bit. To me, it's interesting in this group that how much of a big year this is for Mississippi State and how they're going to deal with that early on. There's a lot of things to like here, but the reality of the situation is that, they bring back Hunter Hines, which is a big get. Could have easily gone a different direction there, but they replaced a lot in the lineup. They had arguably, the best 1-2 punch starting pitching in the SEC last year with Sainja and Cal Steven. So again, I think they're healthier than they've been in a long time. I think that's been a key piece of it. And I know fans hate to hear we're hurt. But man, I don't know how many times in writing up some sort of Mississippi State preview something this year, and just in the last couple of weeks, I've written about somebody who's now fully healthy. When you talk about, whether it's Dylan Cupp or Carson Ligon, Pico Cone, right? Just on and on and on with the guys that they've been missing the last couple of years. And yet they managed to get the program back on track. I think there might be some growing pains for this team as they figure out who they are. And that can be tricky, because the pressure is going to mount a little bit on them as the season goes on to back up what they did last year and keep things moving in the right direction.
Love it. Kendall, go ahead. Any thoughts on this group?
Yeah, I'll touch on Texas real quick. I mean, I think the biggest thing with the Horns, we all know the key offensive cogs for them. Max Blue, Jalen Flores leading the charge. Getting Flores back from for another year with an NIL play there was big for Texas. I will touch on one pitcher in addition to those 2, and keep it at 3, that I think will be very important for the Horns this year. That's Jared Spencer. We've all seen him flourish as a reliever for Indiana State. Obviously, he started several games for the Sycamores last year, but he's a guy that if he can stay healthy, which remains to be seen, but if he can stay healthy and be extended out as a starter in the SEC, he can be pretty special. I mean, when I saw him in the Forward Super a couple years ago, it was 94-98 from the left side with a wipeout slider. He's got really good extension. He can be that guy. We'll see if it happens this spring. And so I think for me, the big key for them is the pitching staff. Jared Spencer, last year we just talked about it earlier, right? That Max Wiener's pitching staff at A&M had the best ERA in the country. Can lightning strike twice for one of the nation's, fastest rising young assistants? If it does, not only is Texas a Omaha caliber team, they're a type of team that can make a run in Omaha. They give me a lot of shades of that 2022 A&M team that had the Dylan Rocks of the world, but their pitching was kind of held together with duct tape till the very end of the season, but still got to Omaha, made a run there, and got to the semifinals. That's what this Texas team reminds me of, and we'll see if they have the same kind of result.
Our good friend Jordan Schusterman, I had the pleasure of talking to him on the phone the other day, and he had a great point on Texas. He said there's a pitcher on their roster already that none of us are talking about that Max Wiener is going to just do a reclamation project on, and that kid's going to just chew up 80 innings this year.
Yeah,
because
Luke Harrison could be that guy.
Yeah. So really, yeah, that's good. Kendall, I may have you come back on DBU, but Fitz, you go first. Go ahead. Oh, you got him?
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about is DBU. That's the team that I like even more than this. I I don't know, I might have them 5 spots higher. I really like this DBU team.
Sure.
It's there's so much power back in the lineup and star power, really good players up the middle. One of the best, offensive catchers in the country, of course, with Grant Shea, and a really good, solid shortstop who's the coach's son, which is helpful. They're going to hit for power once again, but I really love them up the middle, especially. But this program they breed power arms out on a farm somewhere in Texas, and it's just like there's so many of them. And this year, it's of course, James Ellwanger will take his turn as the guy. Now it won't be easy to replace Ryan Johnson. It was one of the best pitchers in the country the last 2 years, really. I mean, just an absolute dude. But Ellwanger has top of the chart stuff. I mean, high 90s fastball with a banger, 3,000 RPM breaking ball. And it's just if he can stay healthy, that's the if. Maybe that's the reason we didn't have them higher. He's got to prove he can hold up to the workload for a full season. But gosh, it's electric. And if he takes that next step, with Luke Pettit is another guy as a sophomore now that I think is ready. I think he looks like a starter to me. His stuff is firm enough. He's got the bloodlines, Andy's son, and that could be a very formidable 1-2 punch. And they've just got so many big arms behind those guys. They do such a great job with their pitching there year in and year out. Only a matter of time. We say it, all the time. DBU, East Carolina, these top programs that haven't gotten to Omaha. Only a matter of time. Could be this year. Said that last year. Say that every year. But it really could be. I mean, I think they're very good.
Hey, I'll do Oklahoma State and Vandy real quick, and then we'll go to 21 through 25. I think they're both very similar in that wide range of outcomes for both. When I think about Vandy, I love the additions of Ty Blankmeyer and Jason King. I think those two new assistant coaches give Vandy an edge that they haven't had in the last couple years. The position player group is old, which is good, but it's not good if they're not good enough, right? Like, they're old. The question is, are they good enough? I'm putting a lot of pressure on Brody Johnson, the freshman. I think Brody Johnson, who's going to play third base and lead off, I think him and RJ Austin potentially give Vandy 2-star players on the field every game. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I also think Vandy's pitching staff is not so obnoxiously talented as it is in the, some years Vandy's pitching staff looks like they're kidding us, right? Like, it's like everyone throws 95 and is 6'4" and beautiful. And this staff is more crafty and trickery. And, Scott Brown has had to really get creative with these guys, but JD Thompson is a high bar fight meter, in your face, left-handed Texas ace. He's Texas. Yes. Thank you. So he's awesome. And, the stuff's plenty good. It's not, top 10 pick stuff, but it's plenty good. And so Vandy's interesting. Hey, Oklahoma State, Josh Holliday, again, worked for Tim Corbin at Vandy, 11 straight regionals. They've got 4 dudes back who went double-digit home runs. Nolan Schubert could go 30 home runs. They've done a nice job in their pitching staff. They've got a lot of plug-and-play innings eaters that have transferred in for the rotation, because they do have to replace a very strong rotation. And then Gabe Davis is their wild card. They need Gabe Davis to really pitch to his talent level, because that's a 6'9" righty that has touched 100 with a wicked upper 80s slider. Gabe Davis they don't need Gabe Davis to have a 1 ERA. They need Gabe Davis to be functional enough to throw 80 innings. If Gabe Davis throws 80 innings, that Oklahoma State's going to have themselves a season. So
I like the way he's progressing too. I'm buying on that.
Yep, 100%. All right, 21 through 25. I'm calling this West Coast Alley and a couple flyers. So we got Arizona, UCSB. TCU's a little West Coast program for me. Kirk Sarlos and Dave Lawn, they recruit California players. I'm gonna.
They're in a West Coast conference right nowadays.
There you go. Well said. And then we got Nebraska at 24 and Troy at 25. So Kendall, why don't you kick us off there? What jumps out about that group for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is kind of the uncertainty with TCU. I know we all kind of debated this, right? When we did the top 25 rankings, like what will the Horned Frogs do? And, I think when you look at the Frogs as a whole, I think the big key for them offensively is Anthony Silva kind of returning back to the old form that we expected last year. And he really scuffled for them. So I think Anthony Silva is kind of the key offensively. Obviously, Carson Bowen is another, key component for them. Last year had a little bit of a shoulder issue. I actually was out for much of the fall with a blood clot in his arm. his health is certainly paramount, both, as an elite defender behind the plate and also as a hitter. I mean, this is a guy who, as a freshman, was a really good hitter for the Horned Frogs. So those are the two keys offensively. I think they're going to be, deep offensively. I think getting Bill Mosiello back in the fold is really good for this offense because, again, I'm not going to, bag on their previous offensive philosophy too much. But, I mean, Mose is just a lot – to me is a more hard-nosed approach, a little bit more aggressive offensively. They're going to hit for more power, at least try to hit for more power. So I like getting Mose back in the mix. And then on the mound, it's really two questions. Can Cole Klecker go back to his form from 2 years ago when he was the Friday night starter for an Omaha team? And B, can Ben Abelt make a smooth transition to the week of rotation? If he can, that's going to be a really good team, in my opinion.
Love it. Joseph, what say you about this West Coast Alien Flyers group?
By the way, TCU also a former Mountain West program. While we're at it,
there we go.
That too.
It's all
I think
coming together.
Just book them. They're a West Coast program as far as we're concerned.
And Nebraska, another team that's in a West Coast conference now. So
that's right. That's right.
Well
speaking of which, I was going to talk about Nebraska. I'm intrigued by this team. It's a group that won the auto bid, the Big Ten tournament last year. A program that's been a little bit up and down. It feels like they have what feels like a breakthrough season followed by a disappointment, and now they've broken through again. The good news about what comes next, though, is they return 7 guys from that team that started 43 games or more last year. Added to that, Hogan Helixo at catcher to replace Josh Caron, who was drafted. Hogan Helixo was a starter at Creighton the last 3 years. And they also brought in Cale Frost in the outfield, who's the Summit League Player of the Year last year at South Dakota State. So your 9 guys are extremely experienced, even if some of the experience isn't at Nebraska. And the pitching staff might miss Brett Sears, but Mason McConaughey, if you really go on like a rate basis as opposed to just a totals basis, his numbers were better than all right. They were right there with Brett Sears for most.
I see what you did there, Joe.
I got the joke off, and then I got thrown off.
Fell off the horse.
Yeah, I got too focused on trying to get that joke off. But they're one of those teams that, look, we understand in the Big Ten you lose a series to the wrong team, your RPI tanks, you miss the postseason. That's kind of the reality of the situation. But if they can keep the train on the tracks as the season goes on, this is the type of old, physical, talented, mature, not flashy, but really steady type of team that you absolutely do not want to see show up as a 2 in your regional. Like the ceiling is an Omaha level team because they're just going to be one of those teams that's not bothered by really much of anything they come across. It's just a matter of, like I said, keeping it on the tracks in the Big Ten regular season to do enough to get to the postseason.
If I may add here, you know why McConaughey chose Nebraska? He just likes Lincoln. He just always has. He likes Lincoln.
Well played. Look at this. We're just getting after it. Fitzy, keep the mic. What from this group do you like? Talk to us.
I'm going to save Arizona and UC Santa Barbara for our resident Runes. I'm going to take Troy, a team that I certainly advocated for. Didn't have to sell very hard. I think everybody likes the cut of this program's jib right now. They were in position last year to even make a run at hosting at one point, and then they just kind of the wheels fell off a little bit late in the year and wound up missing a regional. But they're trending up as a program, and there's just a lot of talent here on both sides. I mean, you talk to some scouts down in Alabama who think they might be the best team in the state down there, and that's why we have them ranked as the best team in the state. We don't have Auburn or Alabama ranked, although we also like those teams, are intrigued by those teams. You've got an All-American catcher, Brooks Bryan, Team USA guy who, in that short list of candidates for best catcher in the country, along with Luke Stevenson. He's really good. But again, they've done really well in the portal. I think keep an eye on Blake Cavill. I think I'm saying that right. Transfer from Western Kentucky. He's the new wonder from down under, boys. Australian joker, a bloke.
What was that?
A bloke.
Not my best effort, but he's a bloke. I don't know if he's from the Outback or not, but he's got tons of personality. I think people are going to really like this guy. And also, he's just a run producer, really hits from left side. He's physical. He can really play first base. I think that's gonna be a nice piece. And power arms on the mound. I mean, again, just with their portal work, gosh, I don't want to break the rules. I'm not going to do it. But I mean, Adam Felinsky is one of two big power righties that they brought in from kind of the portal that I think could be a real difference maker for them. Up to 97 with real stuff. I mean, it's going to be a lot of variety in the mound. Once again, it's another team like Duke where they've got a ton of left-handed pitching and left-handed bats, which I think plays. Generally speaking, it plays. And you can exploit that sometimes, sure, but generally, I think that's a real advantage, and they do that. It's just part of their philosophy. But I think the Sun Belt is so good of a league. Somebody, maybe more than one somebody, is going to be probably more than one somebody's going to wind up being a top 25 team in this league. And there's, we discussed some others, but I think for me, they stand out as the best team in that conference, and the best team in that conference is a top 25 team. So that's Troy for me.
Love it. I'm going to wrap us with those two West Coast teams. So UCSB they were 26-4 in the Big West last year. I mean, just for a league that has so much tradition and had a really good program in Irvine there. I mean, Santa Barbara under Andrew Checketts has become this model program. Tyler Bremner could be the first college right-hander taken in this draft. Like, they got an ace. Scouts couldn't be more excited about Bremner. I don't think he could get the pick 6 right now if the draft was today. And then they've got a kid backing him up, Jackson Flora, who's a 6'5" righty who pitched a lot last year as a freshman, who's up to 98. It's big-time arm strength, and it's easy velocity. And they have a lot their pitching is going to be great. Cole Triba back in the bullpen after his freshman year where he was awesome. They have a lot to replace positionally. Their middle infield is back. They did a nice job grabbing some transfers to plug and play. And I just think, like you alluded to earlier, Joe, we just trust this program. Arizona is interesting because they were picked 8th by everyone in the Pac-12 last year, and they won the regular season and the tournament, mostly because of rotation that was just outstanding. All 3 of those guys are back or are gone. The rotation is gone. So they've got a lot of work to do on the mound. But then, you look at Kevin Vance and John DeRoyan, they're kind of pitching duo there. And those 2 guys are just great at it. And so their position player group for Arizona, though, Brendan Summerhill's back. That's 50 runs and 59 RBIs. This is a 6'3" flyer, left-handed hitter, like a dynamic outfielder. Mason White's back at shortstop. He's a 5'10" left-handed hitter who had 19 bombs last year. And this kid's been putting up 1,000 OPS since he got to Arizona. So Arizona will score a ton of runs. The question will be, how do they replace that rotation that really carried them to a Pac-12 championship last year? So, and of course, they're in the Big 12 this year. So, gentlemen, by the way, look at us, under an hour for a top 25 rankings podcast. Well done.
That's thanks to the Rogers rule. I think I really like, and some of us followed it. I'd like to, compliment those of us who did on a job well done.
Is there a warrant for Kendall's arrest after this podcast, or is it not that extreme? No,
I mean, it's a misdemeanor regardless. So.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of leniency. So, hey, let's wrap it right there, boys. There'll be plenty more podcasts. There's so much great stuff on the website right now. We encourage you to check out ACC Extra. I'm so excited about that new product and the top 25 rankings. The team previews are out where you get categories, you get grades, you get the projected starting 9 plus the projected top 5 arms with their stats from last year. So it really helps you digest what you're talking about there. And we purposely waited to do this podcast until after we had started writing those things, so you fully digest those teams. Gentlemen, great to see you. We are officially in the no sleep zone, people. The season is a month away, and that is it. We will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.